My name is John Willis. I am Director of Ecosystem Development, Docker. The agenda here is I've got like 10 minutes. Normally I do this in 30 minutes, so I'm going to talk really fast. I'm going to talk about something. So at State of the Union in Chicago, I did that. And a lot of times I just come in and talk about whatever I want. And they said, no, John, this time we really want you to do a State of the Union. So I did it. I actually did a bunch of research, and I reached out to a bunch of people. So we'll talk about what Gartner said. I'll talk about some things, taxonomies that have over the years, the survey. I am Botchagaloop on Twitter. That's the best way to get to me. I've done a lot of things. I am a core organizer. This is my 35th Devops Days. I think I hold the world record, although Jason is catching up with me, so I better watch out. Devops Cafe on iTunes is very interesting because we interview a lot of really interesting people. So just quickly on Gartner, Cameron Haid, who's been a good friend, he was actually at the first Devops Days here in Silicon Valley in 2010. I reached out to him, and the only thing I want to say here is, hooray, we are at the peak of inflated expectations for DevOps. Yeah! Enough about Gartner. In 2009, I was fortunate enough to go to the first Devops Days in Ghent. I think I was the only American there. Patrick Dubois had run the thing. And I came back, my good friend Damon, who couldn't make it this week, who's been to every Devops Days here in Silicon Valley, couldn't make it this week because of family obligations. But we actually ran the first one here, this 2010. I got to show you my shirt. My wife found it. It's the actually original shirt from the one right 2 blocks away from here, the LinkedIn. After that, it was just so amazing. Like, I was the original Devops Days, there was like 30 or 40 people, and that was amazing. There was like this renaissance of feeling of like, breaking out of the inertia of IT that wasn't going anywhere, and this light. And then we had it here, we had it 2 blocks, it was 300 people the first Devops Days in the US, right? It was insanity. And so we did a podcast where we just talked about it. Normally we have guests, and we actually accidentally came up with this acronym called CAMS, Culture, Automation, Measurement, and Sharing. I don't have a whole lot of time. I did write an article. I was working for Opscode at the time, what DevOps means to me, where I really explained it, and it still has stood the test of time. Of a lot of the things. I went back and read it before the Chicago DevOps Days, and most of it actually still stands true, in my opinion, of what CAMS means. If I have time, I'll come back to this, but one of the things I realized when I was putting this together, a lot of what I've been thinking about the last couple of years is like complex systems and feedback loops, and I'll talk a little about that in a minute. And I realized CAMS is really a feedback loop. It's a cybernetic feedback loop, and if we want to talk about this more in an open spaces, I would love to. Complexity, cybernetics, all that kind of good stuff. But in general, you get the idea. It's a continuous loop of improvement, learning, all these things. Very, very interesting. In fact, some of the speakers the next 2 days, I know are going to cover some of this awesome stuff. But this is the one I really wanted to talk about. A good friend of mine, Dave Zwieback, he's out of New York. He's just an awesome, awesome dude. And he basically did this article in the beginning of the year, said, came up with a new loose taxonomy. So CAMS was, I say, a loose taxonomy for DevOps. He's this ICE, inclusivity, complexity, and empathy. And like, it really hit my heart. Like, this is, I give off my CAMS, take it, because I love this. Again, in the end of the day, it's any way we can describe people sharing ideas. But, so if I walk through the ICE, I'll talk about the inclusion, right? So don't make fun of my graph, I'm learning R. But if you look at the chart here, if we take, for example, Devops Days, right? We've had, we started off with like 1 in 2009, we had a couple in 2010. We hit kind of a leap going to 2014, and now I think it's going to be 24 this year, maybe 25. I think they added 2, maybe 26. But here's the thing on inclusion, right? So the good news is the numbers have jumped. We've seen some good things. We've actually seen local organizers in terms of diversity, right, which is a subject part of inclusivity. We've added people like Jennifer, Bridget Cohn in Michigan, Sasha, who's going to be speaking today, are all local organizers. Who am I missing? Catherine Daniels in New York. But we still suck because we only have one female core organizer, which is Bridget. But I am proud to announce today, not that it's a big deal, but it is kind of. I talked to Patrick and Bridget, and I nominated Jennifer. And Jennifer, as of today, or at least when Bridget updates the system, Jennifer is now a core organizer in Devops Days. Let's go around. So we've got a 100% increase. And we'll work on fixing that a little bit better, too. But again, we've tried not to be an all-boys club, and, we're just working on it. The DevOps survey, interesting there. If you haven't seen it, it's the 4th year. The last 2 years have been really interesting. 2014, we had 10,000 people respond. It's part of Gene Kim and Puppet Labs. And then we had 20,000 this year. We had Nicole Voskren on our DevOps Cafe recently. She's a true data scientist. We talked about the numbers. The numbers are interesting. But here again, diversity, only 5% female responded to the survey, right? So we've got a lot of work to do. A couple other things about diversity and DevOps Days in general. Jennifer listed the code of conduct. I think the first time we did that was February last year or sometime last year in Pittsburgh. Now it is part of the core. Like, we want people to feel comfortable here. Please don't make anybody feel uncomfortable. I've never felt uncomfortable at a DevOps, like the 35 DevOps days that I've been to. Please make sure you don't make anybody else feel uncomfortable. I mean that with all my heart. Let's move on to other things. The enterprise is an exciting story. We've run 2 DevOps Enterprise Summits. Last year was 400 people. We had 1,200 people this year. These are large enterprises running and talking about how they're doing DevOps. The network people have bought in, thanks to Gene Kim and somebody named Josh Corman, but a larger group, they have something called Rugged. Here's the DevOps Enterprise, the summit. We had a very successful one about 3 weeks ago. The videos are all up. If you want to see how the enterprises are tackling, amazing stuff going on there. And then, like I said, the security folk have bought in. If you haven't heard about Rugged, they even got a manifesto, the Rugged Manifesto. One of the things I loved about what they did here is they didn't try to change the name of DevOps. There's a lot of groups that say, hey, well, shouldn't we call it DevMarked? Shouldn't we call it Devs? They said it's DevOps Rugged. Right? And so I think there's something like pure about not trying to change the name. And they, by the way, out of all the groups that have tried to come in and be inclusive, the security have been kind of the most successful other group. They really are part of if you listen to some of the presentations of injecting, vulnerability scans into the CI loops, doing things like all sorts of things, like there's some projects called Gauntlet, where they actually do behavior-driven development testing as part of the CI process. Really cool stuff. They're taking this serious, and even to the point where they have a manifesto. So that's ICE, the I in the ICE, right? Inclusivity. I'd love to spend more time on any of those discussions in open spaces with you. And then complexity is something I'm very interested in these days. I will say that, so John Osbar, who Jennifer mentioned, if you don't know, you should seek out and read his stuff. But he's been very active, really going back 5-6 years, of trying to include people that have nothing to do with IT, that do human factors, safety culture. Sidney Decker, I got to meet him last year. We had him on a podcast. If you want to read some amazing stuff, read about Sidney Decker. These are the guys that go in after there's a plane crash or a baby dies in a hospital to try to figure out the human factor of why things didn't work. It's all about complexity. Mark Burgess's book is a manifesto about complexity in our industry. I would totally recommend that. And then recently, Jeff Sussna, who's another very interesting, a good friend of mine now, he's written this amazing book called Designing Delivery, and he talks about cybernetics and complexity and UX design and DevOps. Great, great stuff. Another discussion about complexity, they don't have time to talk about, but this Cynefin is a really interesting framework for complexity. I know that a couple of people that are doing like blameless postmortem training are actually included. Dave Zlebrack does a blameless postmortem class. We're trying to talk too fast without a lot of sleep. He includes it in there. I think Jason includes stuff about so Cynefin, maybe we'll get him to talk about that in his presentation, or you are? Good. Oh, awesome. That's awesome. So then you'll get to learn more about that. And then empathy, right? So DevOps is an empathy story from the get-go, right? DevOps, right? Early on, I got involved with Gene Kim to work on this cookbook thing. I think it's going to be out in March, finally. My whole study section, and that was about embedded engineers. How do you get people from ops to work in dev? Blameless postmortems, a safety culture. These are all part. And Jeff Sussna wrote a brilliant article, again, late last year, called The Essence of DevOps. I would totally recommend reading that. Just finishing up, empathy, I think, drives inclusion and complexity. It's all about learning. The Phoenix Project is another empathy novel I would recommend reading. And one kind of last thing I do want to get in is earlier this year we lost a friend in our DevOps community out of the LA community. He's committed suicide due to burnout. I wrote an article about this on Gene's IT Revolution Press, and the feedback has been overwhelming. I got about 100 emails within a week. Velocity has run 3 consecutive sessions on burnout. We've had about 5 or 6 open spaces on burnout. It's a sore spot. It's another area of our industry we need, along with diversity, we need to understand that we in this culture, we might be driving, especially our young people, to the edge, and we need to think and talk more about it. I'll leave the DevOps survey for later because I think I'm over my 10 minutes. Here's the shout-outs to when I asked for information from people to gather information for Chicago State of the Union. These are people that responded to me. If you're not following these people, I'll put the slides up. You should be because they're all pretty amazing. Thank you very much.